Alright, let's see what we want to do. What video do I want to do this week? Open up my show notes here. What have I got? Some ideas. Let's look around. Got a bumpy rides, SLC, wooden coaster retracking. That's not bad. Spinning coasters, sure. Mechanics to run a park. That might be interesting to do. Alright, you want to talk about Top Thrill 2? Let's get into it.
Now get ready. Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ryan Ride Mechanic channel. How the heck are you doing today? If this is your first time here, please make sure you like and subscribe for more content like this, and I do appreciate it. All that stuff helps out. Like, subscribe, share, do everything you want to downstairs. It's great. So today's show, I've been getting a lot of you asking, hey, do you have any information on Top Thrill 2, or what's your idea on Top Thrill 2? Anything along those lines. And I've been holding off on it for a while. Mainly because Cedar Flags came out and said that there's basically they're going to pull the plug on it for the 2024 season, which, I mean, okay, they made the announcement that they're going to pull the plug on it after the 2024 season was pretty much over. So you really didn't lose much of anything here. But this coming amongst a whole bunch of other announcements from the Cedar Flags company that they were going to, pull Kid Flash and some other rides that were falling way behind on schedule. They were pulling them out to the 2025 season as well. So they said, well, what do you think is going on? People ask, what do you think is just going on? What's your thoughts here? First of all, I believe the park and Zamperla are working as hard as they can to get this problem officially resolved. The steps that we've seen up until now, I think, tell the story of what is going to happen. And I think that's pretty evident. I'm not a predictions channel, not at all. But, I mean, let's just look at some of the stuff that's happened. So they opened up the ride, and they put the ride into service. And then just a couple weeks after putting the ride into service, it got shut down. One of the things that I noticed is that a lot of people were talking about the ride shaking left and right, as it was going down the track. This isn't a new thing. Really, Intamin's launch rides, when you look at them, they do the same thing. They shake pretty hard side to side as it goes down the track. It also doesn't help that the track supports in the launch areas are simple, just vertical poles. So if there is any left to right high-speed hunting in the train, that it starts to move the track itself, because you have that much weight trying to accelerate. The track starts to move left and right. I know almost anything, when you accelerate it, it moves. I worked with a U-shape impulse coaster, where the spikes were like this on both sides. And when that guy launches, it takes that entire track and structure assembly and pulls it one direction. So, I mean, there is a lot of force wrapped up in a launch. So the track and structure moves, the train's moving, of course, and everything. And I think one of the things that they underestimated was just how much people move during this process as well. I think this was a it was a miscalculation on Zamperla's part. Now, I know you take into effect people moving into rides all the time. It's not a new thing. This is not Zamperla's first rodeo. They've done this many times before. But this is that train's first rodeo. This is that brand new Lightning train. This is its first time out. So what I think that happened, and this is really evident next time if you're flying in an airplane, sit there if there's some turbulence and the plane starts to bump or shake side to side, just look straight down the row of all the people's heads that are up above the seats. And then you'll see as that train moves a little bit, you'll see everyone's head go side to side as well. Well, you don't realize it that much sitting there that your head's doing that, but it in fact is doing that. It's following there. So now imagine a body up on top of that. Part of this problem is amplified by the restraints. Those restraints are they're much looser on top. They're not like sucked down, hold you tight into the train. They're nice, they're comfortable. I've had lots of people say these restraints are really comfortable. It's just nice and open. It's an airy feeling around there. It's like, yeah, it is. It's a really nice feeling when all you have holding you down is a lap bar. There's not even a comfort vest up there, which isn't a problem. The train is holding you in. It's not a design issue in that aspect. But if I'm wearing let's say a comfort vest up there, like B&M flyers and people like that use, that kind of just holds your body there, not designed to like really stabilize it, but I mean just there to support it. Like when that train jogs side to side, my body moves with it, and I'm kind of locked into that position. See, here's a good one. We'll watch watch my seat here, right? If I am harnessed into this, well, this is a roller coaster seat, so I'm harnessed into this roller coaster seat really tight. When the train moves side to side, I go with it. In fact, the only thing I could do is move my head. That's about it. But if all I have is a lap bar down on my seat, then when the train moves side to side, now my upper body can move, and you can get a lot more sway out of the people. So when you do that, you take the heart line up on top of the train, and you can now move that outside of its area where it kind of should be. So the people riding these trains is much more dynamic than I believe they gave it credit for. They didn't think people would essentially move that much. Now, there's a lot of things compounding what's going on here. So it's not like it's one thing that's like, oh yeah, this did it. Not by a long shot. So what can we look at? We say, well, they said there's serious hunting going on when the train's running. Okay, so they looked at the wheel carriers. Everything started down in the wheel carrier area is kind of what it looks like. Right, when I came out, I released a video a while back. It was like, hey, look, wheel carriers pop back up on the train, and they have gussets welded into them now, or manufactured into them, whichever way they did it. So that looked like they were trying to stiffen the wheel carriers up. It's like, okay, well, if your guide wheels are behaving spongy and the whole assembly is flexing too much, then that would definitely amplify that hunting as it's going down the track. And that would give it shakes and everything else. It wouldn't be good at all. So it's like, all right, they're trying to stiffen that up. Great, let's make some new wheel carriers, get that ride open back up. This is going to be great. But it never did open. So it's like, okay. In the background, I think Cedar Flags was going back to Zamprilla and saying, look, we need to make sure that this is going to be the ultimate fix for this situation. They weren't settling for, which is great. I mean, it was bad for the enthusiasts, but it was great for both companies. Both companies, trust me. It was great. They said, we're not going to settle for a half fix. We're not going to settle for let's get the ride up and running. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure whatever is going to happen to this ride is the permanent end solution to the ride. So because of that, I feel, and again, this is all speculation. I don't have anybody feeding me information in the background, nothing like that. I believe because of that, that's when they said, okay, let's really test and check and make sure that this is in fact the problem. Like, we build brand new wheel carriers, we beef them up to revision 2 or revision 3, like this is going to fix the problem that is happening with that ride. And that's when I think we saw all the strain gauges and stuff start to pop up on there, and they started watching the mechanics of the steel moving while it's going down the track. And even with those new reinforced wheel carriers, it was still kind of, maybe the wheel carrier started behaving great, but maybe the train was still flopping around all over the place. I feel like from there, they're like, okay, the train's still behaving like a piece of spaghetti on the track. It's moving around too much. How do we fix that? And they said, we think the root cause of this is the trains just move too much. How do we fix this? So I think this is when we started to see the train start to pop up with some weird things out there. Things that look like some supports going from one set of seats to the other set of seats. I believe this was also the time when they started removing seats off of the train and basically putting the testing weight back on it. That was one of the things I got a lot of questions about. Is like, why would you take the seats off? And well, the answer for what it looked like on the surface anyway was that it looked like they were putting testing weights back on it. This is a newer concept because a lot of trains weren't built this way in the past and they couldn't really do it. But they basically took all the seats off the top of the thing and took these giant, thick plates of steel and put them on top. And now it wasn't just a plate of steel cut to the size to fit the bolt pattern so they could actually bolt the thing down. They were a specific thickness and shape. That way they actually mimicked the weight of not only the seats up on top, but they mimicked the weight of the dummies as well. So they were essentially able to keep loading and testing the train without actually keeping the seats on there and the dummies on there. So the next question was, why would you do something like that? Well, this would tell you, by removing that weight higher up off the track, this would tell you if you were moving in the right direction or not. So if I kept the seats on there and I kept the dummies on there, then my center of gravity comes up away from the track further and further the more weight I put higher up away from the track. You know, I get more weight towards the heart line, not necessarily the center of gravity of the train. So when you do that, you can start to see like, okay, we can get a base measurement, and the train, we can measure what it's doing. If it's flexing like up and down like a wave, or if it's moving left and right like a snake, we can measure all that information with all these telemetry datas on their strain gauges basically used all over the train. We could see there was hundreds of cables on that thing. So they were trying to measure that, and I think what they were doing is they were measuring it with the weight down low, with just those plates on there. So that moves that center of gravity as low to the track as possible to make it the most stable. And then they put the seats back on with the weight, with the dummies back on there, and they said, let's measure the same thing now. And they did that, and they said, okay, probably said, wow, it's a lot worse. Okay. What else can we do? It's like, well, that was when we started seeing some of those stiffeners pop up, and there's like metal, looks like a connecting spar from the front seat to the back seat. And they were basically trying to stiffen that to say, like, maybe it's just because the seats are moving around too much. Maybe if we boxed in the seats, we can stiffen that up some and probably get rid of some of that galloping or hunting that the train is doing. And I think, I'm just guessing, just pure speculation here, I think some of that probably would have worked. Like if I was trying to strengthen that train up, it probably would have worked. One thing I noticed is that the train's already really lightweight and there's hardly anything to it in the first place. So I'm looking at the train thinking like it just needs a stiffer backbone down the center. But to do that, that means like 3/4 of the thing needs to be redesigned to basically strengthen it and make it bigger and beefier, which is going to throw off the weight calculations, which is going to throw off every single design aspect inside that train. So I think that the trains that are on the track right this very second, or were, I'm not sure, I think they're still on there right now. I think what we're looking at is the revision 0. Those are the prototype trains. And I think what's going to happen is I think next year when that ride opens up, we will see, well, we might not be able to see, but probably we will see revision 1 trains. So this will be an entirely new Lightning train out there. So it'll have probably a stiffer backbone front to back. It will probably have more of a connected and bolted in floor pan, trying to stiffen up between the 4 seats. I'm just shooting in the dark here, speculation. But it's going to be bigger and beefier underneath there. One of the other things that happened while this was going on, I got some people sent me some information that said, hey, it looks like they're looking at the track with black lights. And then we also saw measurements pop up on the track too. And then we saw them climbing the track. I said, what do you think's going on? And I just thought about it. I'm like, well, black lights, track, the only thing that you'd use that for is NDT. Why would they be NDT in the track? I mean, you could be looking for cracks. Okay, they could have thought the thing went all Space Mountain on them and started cracking the track apart because the center of gravity was up so high. But I don't think that was it. Actually, once I gave those couple like, well, it sounds like NDT, dye penetrant testing or something, where you need a black light to see if there's cracks or something in there. Then I got some pictures, and I saw some videos with pictures, and it's like, oh, they were just using the light on there, but they didn't take the paint off the track. And then I was like, well, wait a minute, for NDT, you have to take the paint off. You can't go through the paint, especially with something like dye penetrant or something like that has to have paint off so you're down to bare steel, unless you're using X-ray, eddy current, something like that doesn't necessarily need the paint removed. Way more expensive to do, though, in the first place. But then I looked at it a little closer, and I saw what they were using, and it looked like a little handheld thing with 2 lights on it. And I was like, what is that? I didn't understand what they were using because it didn't look like a black light you would use for seeing cracks and things like that. So I dug into that a little bit, and it came back with a handheld 3D scanner. Oh, that's interesting. And I saw videos and pictures of them moving throughout the entire track, up and over the spike, everything with that scanner. So I thought, well, let's see what's going to happen here. We already know, or I am speculating, again, I'm not a speculations channel, speculating that they've already put the nail in the coffin and said those trains are done. They're too flimsy, essentially, for what it needs to do. So they move too much, so we need revision number 1, because those are prototypes, they're revision 0. So we need revision number 1 built of the train to stiffen it up. It's like, okay. And then I think we went back to Cedar Flags again, or Six Fairs, whatever you want to call it. They went back to those guys and said, like, we're sure the trains being replaced are going to fix this problem. And they said, well, we think it will. How do we know for sure? It's like, well, let's bring the whole track into CAD. And they brought the entire track into CAD, and the only way to do that really is to scan what's there. Now, we've scanned rides before. I remember we scanned our wooden roller coaster before it got to RMC, and they set up laser scanner things and take a picture of the ride, essentially. It takes a long time to do, but when you're done, the thing's essentially a full CAD, like SolidWorks model when you're done with that scan. It was pretty impressive. Now, that was only 115 feet high, I think. So I'm thinking because of the height, the sheer size of Top Thrill, that I think they needed to go up by hand and do it. And the handheld scanners are much better these days to where you could just sit there. They use them on your teeth if you ever go, like I had Invisaligns done, and they put this little scanner inside your mouth and they just wobble it around and the thing takes a 3D image and it plots it out and it knows exactly where it is. So that technology has come a long way. So I think what they did is they scanned the entire track and structure in essentially using a handheld scanner, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. So I think what they're looking at now is the last 2 components of the ride, which were in people's comments, these were the areas that really made you go, wow. This was some of the wow factor to the ride, and not in a good way. It seemed like it was kind of in a this isn't going to be great type fashion. So those 2 points are the turns, because we went up straight up that first. The spike in the back is straight, and then you went up the front tower and you went straight, which is fine because all of your energy, everything is going straight. It's just a pull up, no big deal there. Then comes the turn. That's the 90 degrees where it rotates you to the right, I believe it is, and then you go up and over that top hat, and then you do the 270 degree spiral on the way down. My math works right. 270 plus 90 equals 360. So yeah, that's right. 270 degree spiral on the way back down. And people were telling me that those turns, the spiral and that 90 degree turn, were borderline violent because they said they really threw them off to the side. That's a problem when you don't support the upper half of the body, because that opens you up for back strain, your lower back, because your body now has to catch your weight coming over there. So I think that is when they were looking at trying to slow the ride down. They're like, how are we going to slow the ride down so it's not so violent on the top and coming back down on the bottom? And I don't think they came up with a good way to do that. And I don't think there is a good way to do that, to slow the ride down to do that. So essentially that's broken in my mind. It's like, ugh, that is a stumbling block, a major stumbling block. So what is going to happen from here? So we got revision 1 trains coming in. This is purely speculation again. Do not be surprised if over this off season we see track show up again. I have a feeling they're going to rebuild the top hat. Now, not necessarily supports. I think they probably could use the supports that are there, although they'll have to probably rebuild a chunk of them. And I think what we're going to see is, I think they're going to rebuild the 90 degree twist going up and the 270 degree spiral going back down. And I'm thinking, since those are so much of those up and down side of that hill, that I'm figuring they're probably going to redo the curve at the top too. If you're going half the track up on one side and half the track up on the other side, it's like you might as well redo the top while you're at it. And what they're going to redo on these is basically Intamin's trains we knew sat lower into the track. That means the train center of gravity was low and the heart line of the rider was low as well. These trains sit much higher off the track, and the heart line is even higher than that. So I'm thinking what's going to happen is they're going to rebuild that top hat, or at least probably 50% of the top hat in the track wise, and they're basically going to redo that 90 and the 270 degree to where they are wider. So instead of getting that whip out of your seat, which I understand a lot of people are still like, wow, that was fun. Instead of getting that whip out of your seat, they're just going to make it turn around the heart line of the rider, and that should decrease the side-to-side stress on the train as well. Now, you're saying like, well, what does that matter? When you're coming back down off the tower on the other side, when you go through that 270 degree spiral, if your weight is all flung out to the side and people are hanging over their seats like this and they're like, whoa, I'm way out there, when that suddenly gets straight and then goes to pull that up again, straight and back up like that, when that does that, everyone's all over the place in the train and they straighten back up, and that causes the train to start to hunt again coming down, and it starts to go all over the place, all over that track again, because the original Intamin track only has vertical supports in that area because it wasn't meant for lots of hunting. Like as soon as you start to hunt that train on those vertical supports, the whole track starts to wobble and the whole track turns into a piece of spaghetti, so they need to keep it straight. So I do believe that over this off-season we are going to see brand new trains for the ride show up, and they could reuse they don't have to fabricate 100% brand new. They might choose to, but I would imagine you could probably use the seats and the restraints over again. I believe it's the chassis down below. So you're going to see at least new chassis pop up, new floor pans, new wheel carriers, which are probably going to mean new axles and things like that the wheel carriers have to bolt to. I imagine we're going to see all that stuff brand new come in, if not an entirely new train, which they're going to be blue and silver, what have you. They're going to look exactly like the old ones just to the naked eye. And then I believe also we're going to see that top hat rebuilt, because I think what we're looking at is a storm of, it was a lot into the train and the train just needed to be stiffened up, but then there was a lot in the track, which was another component. And I think Cedar Flags wanted that, both of them, to be fixed, and they wanted like a stamp, a guarantee that this is going to fix the problem. And we will have in 2025 a stable, reliable working ride. And I think that's kind of what's happening out there. That's kind of all the stuff I've seen, all the stuff I've put together. Now, long term, what's this mean? It's kind of bad for Zamperla, because they can build those trains, they could put them on an Intamin track, but if they're too big and their center of gravity is too far off, well, they can't offer those trains as a retrofit to some of those rides because the center of gravity is too far off, so that it might not work, just like what happened on Top Thrill. So I don't know if that's going to be a viable solution for Zamperla to provide to other parks in the future as a retrofit for some rides. So one of the things Zamperla might really have to work on is they might have to work on compressing those trains back down into a tighter space, into a smaller train, to get them to mimic more of Intamin's trains. Well, if we could fix the track and we could fix the train and we can get those two married together on Top Thrill, why would you want to fix anything else in the future if it works? It's like, because from Zamperella's side, they're going to look at the sales tactic here. If Zamperla, and I've always said this, if they can market these trains as a replacement for Intamin stuff, then that's a pot of gold sitting right there, because there's a lot of parks that would go like, oh yeah, let's get that Zamperla stuff. Yeah, it's cheaper. It's readily available. They have parts for it. Like, let's go get that. But if they can't, that means that this Lightning train that they built for the Top Thrill overhaul is essentially going to be a one-off train. And then that modular design that these Lightning trains were focused on might not be good replacements for Intamins, but we won't know until they try it on another ride, like a Mack ride or something like that. An Aero, Vekoma, anything like that. I mean, you could put them on a lot of different rides, but they won't know until they try it there. And then what's going to happen is that anybody in the industry is going to look back at Top Thrill and kind of look at Zamperla again with a raised eyebrow. It's like, what are you going to do to ensure that what happened with Top Thrill doesn't happen with our ride? Now, the answer might actually be simple. They might actually have all this data that they're gathering right now from all these tests and these things that they're doing. They might actually have all this figured out now, and that might be the point. What are you going to do to ensure this doesn't happen again? And they said, here is all the data. This is what we can provide. And they say, as long as your current trains on whatever ride it is are within XYZ tolerance to the track, we can offer you the Lightning train as a viable retrofit to your ride. It's going to be sales on Zamperla's ends. That's what they're going for, and I'm sure they're also building rides with that train as well. So it's not like it will never ever be used again, but it will be harder to retrofit and sell that train to other parks if they can't guarantee that the problem won't happen again. So that was pretty much the elephant in the room. A lot of you have been contacting me about Top Thrill 2, and I did want to put my thoughts out there. Again, these are just my thoughts. I have nothing to do with the park or Zamperla or anybody else like that. Simply just speculation from what I see. I see that it looks like they are trying to stiffen up the train, and it looks like they are severely looking at whether the track is in the correct shape to allow those trains to run. There could be a tolerancing issue with Intamin's track. I kind of doubt it, but the thing that would be wrong with the track more than likely is the heart line on those 90 degree and the 270 degree. Intamin's got a fairly tight tolerance on their track. So most manufacturers don't manufacture really tight track because it costs a lot of money to manufacture. Make sure you like and subscribe, do all that stuff downstairs. It does help me out, and I do appreciate it. If you want to contact me, feel free. Either you can comment. I try to read all the comments I can on there, and or you could email me at ryantheridermechanic@yahoo.com. And I'm pretty responsive on there, but sometimes things fall through the crack. Spam filters kick stuff out all the time. But I try. And let's see what else. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing Top Thrill 2 up and running stronger than ever next season. I know it was like, is it going to be Top Thrill 3? It's like, no, I think it would still be Top Thrill 2 when it opens under the full Six Flags name at that point. I wonder also if some of this back and forth between Intamin and Cedar Fair was clogged up by the Six Flags merger, because it's kind of one of those things liability-wise that you have to make sure you know who you're doing business with, and when the courts tie that up and legal orders tie things up like that, that might have slowed the process down, because it all boils down to where money's going. Sometimes those things are hard to do when you're doing a lot of legal merging and things like that. I think that's about it for this video. Stay off the air gates. Bye.